We begin tonight with a bit of a political shock from Capitol Hill tonight. Do you remember what made Republican Senator Jim Bunning of Kentucky nationally famous back in February? It was his one-man stand to block benefits for people who'd lost their jobs, taking a stand against people with no income, yelling things like, "Tough expletive," from the floor of the Senate while he was doing so, all the while complaining that blocking people's benefits was taking up a lot of his precious time, which meant horrible hardships for him, like missing a college basketball game he wanted to watch.
I have missed the Kentucky-South Carolina game that started at 9 o'clock.
At the time, Senator Bunning was seen as a lone obstructor, a hard-hearted renegade choosing draconian principle over the well-being of the American people.
So we just wanted to ask you...
Excuse me, this is a senator-only elevator.
Can I come on the elevator?
No, you may not.
Can you tell us why you're blocking this vote?
I already did. Explained it.
Well, what is the issue? And are you concerned about these people who are unemployed?
I've got to go to the floor.
Senator, can you just explain to us why you're holding this up? I'm sure you have an explanation.
Excuse me.
Okay, are you concerned about those that are going to lose their benefits?
In addition to altercations like that with the mainstream press, there was vocal outrage on the left and in the center, and a distinct absence of "attaboy Jims" on the right. Nobody wanted to be Jim Bunning back in February when he pulled this stunt. Tonight, with the country and the news media looking the other way at the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico and the tumult in our military's chain of command, tonight they're all Jim Bunning. Every Republican in the United States Senate, plus Ben Nelson, is Jim Bunning. For 8 weeks, Senate Democrats have sought passage of a bill to reauthorize several expired stimulus programs. The bill included relief to the now more than 1.2 million Americans who've been out of work longer than 6 months, whose benefits have expired. It also meant to fund state Medicaid programs and to extend a bunch of tax breaks for businesses and for families. The original bill was filibustered last week, so Democratic leaders went hunting for votes, using the old and unreliable tack of weakening the bill, making it less stimulative to the economy and less helpful to the people it's supposed to help. Because worse bills, the theory goes, attract more votes. I'll never understand that. The result of Democratic pandering for Republican votes was a bill that did less for unemployed people by $25 per check. It pumped less lifeblood into the flagging recovery effort for our economy as a nation, and it left states more broke than they already are because of their Medicaid costs. By the time of today's cloture vote on the bill, Democrats had trimmed down the bill by about $100 billion. It was down to about $112 billion. All but $35 billion was paid for, which makes for great Tea Party rhetoric, but actually makes for less economic stimulus. Still, whatever. Guess what the Democrats got for their trouble. Guess what the Democrats got. Guess what the Democrats got for doing all of that weakening, for making weaker, less effective policy. Guess what they got? They got 0 votes. Huzzah! This afternoon, every single Republican and Democrat, Ben Nelson of Nebraska, united to kill the bill, preventing an up or down majority rules vote. Stop me if this sounds familiar. Democrats needed 60 votes to go ahead. They only got 57. They got a huge majority, 57 votes in a body that only has 100 votes total, but that's not enough now. That's not enough anymore because majority doesn't rule anymore, and Republicans filibuster everything, even unemployment benefits in the middle of an economic downturn.
I have missed the Kentucky-South Carolina game that started at 9 o'clock.
Boo-hoo. Republican leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky defended his party's relief-killing opposition by saying, quote, "The only thing Republicans have opposed in this debate are job-killing taxes and adding to the national debt." This is what he says about a vote for tax cuts and the single most effective means of economic stimulus we know of, which is benefits for the unemployed, for people who desperately need the money and who will spend it, which is what economic stimulus is. Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan was on fire about this today. We had her on the show to talk about this very issue recently. You might remember the fire in the belly she showed in that guest appearance. Well, this is how she made her case before today's honestly quite shocking vote on the floor of the Senate.
When President Obama came into office, we were losing about 750,000 jobs a month. That's what he inherited. And we said, you know what? This hasn't been working for the majority of people. We put in place the Recovery Act, and we began to climb out. Now, we're not all the way out, but these guys are going, stop! Oh my gosh, it's beginning to work. This may affect the elections. Let's do everything we can to stop the recovery.
Joining us now is Ezra Klein, staff writer for The Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor, about which we are all very proud and happy. Ezra, thanks very much for joining us.
Good evening.
Ezra, Senator Stabenow, in that clip that we just showed, is making a case that it's not exactly conspiratorial, but it is a brutal allegation that Republicans and Ben Nelson would be voting against this in order to stop the recovery, because that might be politically inopportune for them. What is your assessment of that claim?
I don't think it is so cynical as all that. But I think that people have a remarkable ability to convince themselves of what is in their political best interest. So back when Republicans were in power in 2001 and there was a recession coming from the tech bubble bursting, they said they were going to do tax cuts because that would stimulate the economy. And they put those tax cuts on the deficit, and then they did it again in 2003 under the same rationale. And now that Barack Obama and the Democrats are in charge of this and they will take the blame for a bad economy, suddenly the concern of the debt becomes a much bigger issue. But if you compare the two things, the amount this would have added to the debt, today's bill, is 0.00043%. By comparison, it would have been about $30 billion. By comparison, the tax cuts between 2012 and 2022, if we extended them, $6 trillion. Wow. So people move around depending on where their political interests lie.
Wow. By the end of this week, more than 1.2 million Americans will have lost their jobless benefits. Republican Senator Olympia Snowe of Maine said she supports extending unemployment benefits, even if she didn't vote for this bill. Do you think it is still possible that a separate bill, even if it's just focusing on the unemployment benefits, might get a vote, might pass?
I do think it's possible. I think Olympia Snowe very explicitly left the door open to it today. But what you're seeing here, and you brought this up a little bit in your introduction, is the bill is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point that it is certainly not a meaningless bill. Those unemployment benefits are important to a lot of people. But we have 9.7% unemployment. We've got to get the economy out of the ditch. We haven't done enough. The economy was worse than we recognized it was when we passed the original stimulus, which we knew then was too small. And we are lowballing it. I mean, what we're seeing here in the Senate today is they've decided, essentially, the Republicans, to move on from dealing with the recession. Today, sort of the recession ended for the Senate and the election began.
Wow. In my understanding, both from talking to people in Washington and from just reading the Beltway press on this, is that Democrats thought we hadn't reached that point. Democrats really thought that making the bill worse, making the bill smaller, would make it pass, that at least they'd get a vote from somebody like Senator Scott Brown, who said, of course, his only priority is jobs, jobs, and jobs. If even the jobs, supposedly moderate senator, if even Collins and Snowe won't necessarily vote for unemployment benefits, do you think that Democrats need to just recalibrate, recognize that, as you say, we're not dealing with policy anymore, we're only dealing with politics?
I think that's right, and they need to recalibrate for the realities of the situation they're in. The biggest mistake Democrats made was not putting more reconciliation instructions into the budget so they could move legislation like this on a 51-vote basis. You can't get much done in the United States Senate when you don't have 60 votes and the other party has an incentive to make you fail. So that's essentially where they are now. And if they had put reconciliation instructions in, if they had said to each other that we are simply going to have to govern by majority vote here, and we're going to have to do in advance what is necessary to give us that opportunity as often as possible, they'd be in better shape now.
And it'd be one thing if we were just talking about Republicans making Democrats fail. In this case, we're talking about Republicans making the country fail, and a lot of people ending up probably on the street because of it. Ezra Klein of The Washington Post, also an MSNBC contributor. Thanks, as always, for your time, Ezra.
Thank you.